Founder and CEO of a group called Truth in Accounting. We're a 501c3, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization who works to provide citizens with financial information about their governments so they can be knowledgeable participants in their governments. I started Truth in Accounting in 2000, over the 2000 presidential election. It wasn't, I didn't care who got elected, but I was concerned about the information that people were given. The professors will probably remember, but back then we were being told that we had surpluses as far as the eye could see. Governor Bush, who was running for president at the time, was running around saying that he was going to take that surplus and give it to the back to the American public in the form of a tax cut. And Vice President Al Gore was saying that he was going to put the money in a lockbox to keep it secure. And I, in essence, every night was shaking my TV saying, hold it, there isn't a surplus. Quit talking about this surplus. And after the election, I was like, let me get this straight. Did we just elect the leader of the largest financial organization in the world, the federal government, based upon the wrong numbers? And so therefore, I'm not a complainer, I'm a doer. So I started Truth in Accounting to provide citizens with the truthful numbers. Because we still are not getting the truthful numbers. For example, right now, you'll hear that the national debt is $20 trillion, which is a lot of money. But this is not the truthful number. It does not include all of our debt that we have. And if you include that, then our national debt is over $104 trillion. And I know that sounds like a huge number, and it is, but to provide some context to it, in order to fix that, each taxpayer would have to write a check to the Treasury for $688,000 just to fund that $104 trillion. And we provide on our website, truthinaccounting.org, we provide the $20 trillion debt and then the truthful debt. And then again, we divide that by the number of taxpayers in the country to come up with a per taxpayer share of $688,000. So what is the difference? How come, they're saying it's 20 trillion and we have $104 trillion? Well, that's because their 20 trillion includes the debt held by the public and also intra-governmental holdings. So let's look at the pieces of those two items. One, the debt held by the public. What does that mean? Well, the debt held by the public is all of the federal debt that is held by individuals, corporations, state and local governments hold this debt. The Federal Reserve has some of it, and foreign governments like China also are holding this federal debt. So these are all of the Treasury bonds, Treasury bills, U.S. savings bonds. I don't know if anybody out there has any U.S. savings bonds in their drawers at home, but the national debt is included in that. So that is the publicly held debt. So then at $14 trillion, coming up on $15 trillion very soon. But they also have the intra-governmental debt. And I'm getting these numbers from, there's a website, Treasury website called Debt by the Penny. And this keeps a running total of the federal debt. So what is the intra-governmental debt? This is debt that the government owes to itself. So the largest portion of this is what they call government trust funds. So you've heard of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds. Now, keep in mind, this isn't all of the promises that are owed to all Social Security and Medicare recipients. This is just what they call the trust fund debt. So let's try to understand what they mean by a trust fund, because you'll have to keep in mind that a trust fund in the government does not mean the same thing as a trust fund in a private sector. In the private sector, if somebody holds money in trust for somebody else, they keep it secure, and then they provide it to the people. That's not what it means in the government. The reason it's called a trust fund in the government is because that's what Congress decided to call it. So, can we trust the trust funds? The government says we can, but no, not so much. In essence, trust funds are IOMEs. So for example, IOMEs, let's look at this in relation to, let's say that you want to have a holiday fund. So I want to save money for gifts for the holidays. So in January, I start saving money and I put money into the piggy bank, into my holiday trust fund. And I keep on doing that month by month. So hopefully in December, I will have enough money to pay for my holiday gifts. And this accumulates month to month. But let's say in July, I decide that I want to buy a swimsuit, but I don't have enough money in my savings or checking account. So how am I going to buy a swimsuit? So I remember, hold it, I have that holiday fund. I could use some of that to buy my swimsuit. So I take money out of my piggy bank and I replace it with an IOU. So unfortunately, the swimsuit cost everything in my piggy bank. So I replace all of the money in my piggy bank with IOUs. And when it becomes December, I don't have any money, I just have these IOUs. And that is what's going on with the Social Security Trust Fund. As money comes into that account, whatever they don't spend on Social Security and Medicare benefits, the US Treasury takes that money and they use it for other government services and benefits. And then they issue IOUs to the trust fund for any excess money that they have. So the trust funds don't have any money in them. They just have all these little notes that say, well, the general fund owes the trust fund this money. So a great quote from the Congressional Budget Office is that a federal trust fund balances are not assets of the government. Under current law, trust funds are just an accounting gimmick established to link the receipts that the government collects or assigns to a specific use with the spending of those receipts. So they go ahead and they try to link how much Social Security benefits taxes have we received versus how much we have taken out. And people will say, well, there's no need to fix Social Security because those trust funds will last forever. And not last forever, but last for decades. And I think right now they say that they're going to be depleted in 2034. But keep in mind that there's only those IOUs, or I call them IOMEs, in the trust funds. So this 2034 date just means that over all of the lifetime of Social Security, they will have collected a certain amount of Social Security taxes, and they have paid equal amount of Social Security benefits. So another great quote is that the trust fund solvency is meaningless measure of the government's ability to pay the benefits. Because again, how can you pay any benefits out of IOMEs? And another great quote is that the Social Security Trust Fund is neither funded nor should it be trusted. So back to our national debt, we have $20 trillion reported and $104 trillion of the true debt. So how did we come up with the $104 trillion? Well, what we did is we looked at the audited financial statement of the federal government. You'll see on the left side, we looked at our assets and these assets would be assets, buildings that the government owns, land that the government owes. And this scale, keep in mind that this chart is in billions. So the assets that we own are 3,470 billion, which would be $3.4 trillion. And then we compare that to the bills that we have. So the first thing we have is unfunded Social Security promises of $31.4 trillion. Now this equals it's an estimation of, okay, over the next 75 years, how much Social Security taxes are we going to collect compared to how much benefits are we going to pay? And at this point, we're going to pay $31.4 trillion more in Social Security benefits than we're going to collect in taxes. And in Medicare, that's even a larger number. That's $44.7 trillion. Also, on the federal government's audited balance sheet, they have pension and retiree health care benefits due. So these are the benefits that are due federal employees and our veterans. We do have the publicly held debt of $14 trillion. And we have other liabilities of just miscellaneous liabilities of $1.4 trillion. And that all adds up to our true debt, our true financial hole, not the $20 trillion, but $94.5 trillion. And we get up to the $104 trillion because we have been adding interest to that since the last time the federal financial statements were issued. Sorry to jump around on you. The debt clock, this is stagnant right now, but on our website, it's continually spinning to take into account interest that's being earned on all of that debt. So, but keep in mind that the Social Security and Medicare debt, we included, remember, they're not including that in the federal debt. And they're kind of doing like Enron, they were doing Enron accounting. They don't include all this Social Security and Medicare liabilities on the federal government's balance sheets. I went before there's an accounting standards board called the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board. And it sets, hey, what should be reported on the federal government's balance sheet and what shouldn't be. And I was astounded to find out that the Social Security and Medicare, all these promises that they've been making to all these seniors are not being recorded as a liability on the federal government's balance sheet. And how could that be? So I went to testify, and a gentleman who testified right before me was the chief actuary of Social Security named Steve Goss. And Mr. Goss testified that these Social Security and Medicare promises, the ones that our seniors are counting on, are not liabilities of the federal government, so they should not be on the federal government's balance sheet. I was like, excuse me, what are you talking about? These are true liabilities of the government. People have been promised them. What do you mean? Well, what he testified was, well, they shouldn't be a liability because one thing is that there was a law where an immigrant was deported by the federal government. He had paid into Social Security. He had paid Social Security taxes. But when he was deported, Congress decided that they could take those benefits away from him, and they did. And so Mr. Goss's rationale was that Congress can take away anybody's benefits. So it's not a liability because Congress can just take away the benefits of anybody. The other rationale people argued was the number is so large that it would scare the American public. People wouldn't understand that large of a number. Remember, it's more than, Social Security is more than 31 trillion and Medicare is more than $44 trillion. That large number might just worry people too much. Another thing is it would dwarf all the other items on the balance sheet. And my point would be, yeah, it's a huge liability. It would dwarf all the other numbers on the balance sheet. Mr. Goss, and a quote from Mr. Goss, he says, if through law or other administrative means, the federal government can unilaterally alter or eliminate the obligation to another entity, then it can't exist as a liability or as an asset of the federal government. So in essence, what Mr. Goss is saying is that the federal government doesn't owe anybody any Social Security or Medicare benefits because they can change tomorrow. Congress can go into session and get rid of those benefits. Another quote from Mr. Goss during his testimony before the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board was, an overriding uncertainty exists under the Social Security and all federal social programs. This is the government's right and ability to alter potential future benefits. Until the benefits are due and payable, there is no binding commitment over which a worker has control, and no such liability can be recognized. So again, he's saying that the federal government, I was shocked, he's saying the federal government owes nobody any Social Security or Medicare benefits beyond the checks that are currently written. And that's why they do not want to record it as a liability on the federal government balance sheet. Now, I testified after him and said, fine, if you don't want to record it as a liability, then I recommend a major educational campaign of the American public so they understand that the federal government doesn't owe them any benefits, that they cannot count on their Social Security, and these are not promises. So from this, I realized that Social Security and Medicare, when it comes out of your paychecks, when either you're starting to work or you do work now, these are not contributions. These are just taxes. You are not contributing into the Social Security program. You are paying taxes to the federal government that they just happen to identify as Social Security benefits, Social Security taxes. So there is a myth by everybody that when you start working, you're going to pay into Social Security. That is a myth. Mr. Goss said, again, the chief actuary of Social Security, said that benefits are not directly related to or commitments upon the receipt of earnings or the payment of taxes. So again, when money is taken out of your paychecks for Social Security, you are not contributing to the Social Security program, and the government is not committed to pay you any benefits that are being taken, any benefits, because you are paying those taxes. So let's look at, let's pretend that right now we're looking at somebody's W-2 who works like 20 hours a week. They make $15 an hour, and they would make $15,600. You'll notice this is the W-2 that is sent to you at the end of the year from your employer as you work. You'll notice in the right-hand column, there's federal income taxes withheld. There are also Social Security taxes withheld and Medicare taxes that are being held. The Social Security amount is $967.20. And the Social Security amount that was taken out of this fictitious worker is $226.20. So over this person who only is making $15,600 a year, almost $1,200 is being taken out of their paychecks for Medicare and Social Security taxes. In addition to their $1,200 being taken out, keep in mind that that your employer will match that number. And I contend that if the employer didn't have to pay that amount to the federal government for those taxes, then they would probably increase your salary by $1,200. So in essence, you're paying taxes of $2,400 is going to the federal government for these Social Security and Medicare taxes. And if somebody's only making $15,600 a year, I think that that would be a large amount of money to them. And they could use that for a lot of different groceries and a lot of different other products. So you have to remember, again, you're not contributing. These are just a pure and simple tax. So then I ask you, if somebody who's making $15,000, should those taxes be being given to people who have a higher standard of living than they do? So for example, should some of this $2,400 go to millionaires? Should it go to people who are billionaires? And it currently does. In 2010, 47,500 millionaires received received Social Security. An amount of $1.4 billion. So again, should somebody who's only making $15,000 be paying taxes and that going to billionaires? I asked you a rhetorical question on whether that is a moral, something that is moral or not. And so at this point in time, we're going to talk about who pays the Social Security taxes, how much each type of people are paying, and how much benefits they're going to get. And for that information, I'm going to switch it over to my research director, Bill Bergman, and he's going to discuss this. Say hi to Bill.
Hi to Bill. Thanks, Sheila. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for coming. My name's Bill Bergman. I'm, quote, the Director of Research, unquote, for Truth in Accounting. I began working here about 4 years ago after giving a talk on the financial crisis. And a fellow in the front row gave me a business card with the logo for Truth in Accounting and encouraged me to get to know this Sheila Weinberg person. And one thing led to another, and we've been doing a lot of hard work on Sheila's mission, trying to help people understand government financial reporting and promote truthful government financial reporting for the citizens of the United States. Within this layers of Social Security idea, the dollar amount that Sheila cited, for instance, for Social Security, the $31 trillion negative position for the federal government, is actually a number that includes the current participants who have not yet reached eligibility age, as well as the current participants that have reached eligibility age and have drawn Social Security. That's where that $31 trillion hole that we cite arrives. That dollar amount is a negative amount, and it's a present value, which underlines again the importance of some of those courses you're taking right now in your finance and accounting courses, the fundamentals of discount rates and present value, taking future anticipated tax revenue and expenditures on these benefit programs and discounting them to the present. It's a fundamental estimate of that $31 trillion. However, that $31 trillion, which, as Sheila noted, is not on the federal government's balance sheet, is in fact reported in a different financial statement of the federal government in the United States. If you go to the financial report of the United States government, and the new one is due in a week or two, that should come out. There's also included within the financial statements something called the statements of social insurance. Those statements of social insurance depict the financial position as estimated by the government for Social Security and Medicare. And in that statement of social insurance for Social Security, you see that there's not only the current participants that have not reached eligibility age, the current participants that have reached eligibility age, as well as the future participants. The future participants are the folks, the younger people that have not yet begun to pay into the system, that the government expects to pay into the system in the future under current law. And that leads to actually 3 different layers of Social Security that are reported in the financial report of the US government. You've got the participants who have reached eligibility age. They kind of get, well, that's the cake. And the next group of participants are the participants who are not reached eligibility age yet, but they will reach eligibility age. They get another slice of the cake, and maybe those folks at the bottom get the icing. But there's a third group of participants, and that's the future participants in the layers of Social Security. Those future participants actually they're getting a slice of the cake, but it's not cake or icing. And we depict here some perhaps sarcastic Tide detergent pods for future participants. The statements of social insurance in the federal government's financial report, the bottom line for Social Security is not $31 trillion. It's only, quote unquote, a negative $14 trillion, which is actually a net amount, given that there's a $17 trillion positive contribution to the net present value from future participants. And in other words, that suggests that the government is expecting a positive net contribution from future participants in order to offset the negative hole that exists for the current participants for the government in the plan. And if that's true, the implication is that future participants themselves are looking at a huge hole, not a benefit, but a huge hole in their return on Social Security. In this slide, what we have is a slide depicting a new web page that's been set up by the Social Security Administration. This web page is called My Social Security Account, and here's the front page of the website. There's a picture of a younger fellow, and it looking across into the future and telling him to set yourself free. Open a Social Security account today and monitor your Social Security account at this website, and in turn, quote, rest easy knowing that you're in control of your future, unquote. Can we think about this message for the moment in light of what Sheila was discussing earlier about the logic that the federal government gives us to underlie their decision not to include Social Security as a liability on their balance sheet? That logic included more or less the admission or statement by the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration that the federal government controls the law and can change the benefits at any time. Is that consistent with this message that the Social Security Administration is giving to the public and to younger people that are just entering the system for the first time? We would argue perhaps that it's inconsistent, and maybe a better website front might be the following. By way of background, we shared this information with an economics conference and showed the first slide with the confident-looking fellow looking off into the future, and one of the economists after the discussion kind of snidely said, maybe, you know, that picture isn't so deceptive. In fact, he's looking over a cliff. And that's why we ended up producing this perhaps sarcastic, but perhaps accurate characterization of the messaging in our government and Social Security and the accounting for Social Security.
So thank you very much, Bill. So what we've been trying to do is educate you about how the Social Security and Medicare really work, and also about the true debt. And I think the bottom line for me is that as you're looking at Social Security, you need to understand that you're not paying into it. And there is no account out there that has your name on it that's going to, that the government is putting money in to give you benefits. And that there is, when you hear the word trust fund, remember it is not to be trusted and there are no funds in there. So we highly encourage you to educate yourself about the national debt. You can do that by going to our website, truthinaccounting.org. Here is the home page. And you'll again see at the lower right-hand corner our debt clock, which is spinning. And we provide you with information about the national debt and on a daily basis. This website also at the very bottom of it has the ability for you to sign up for something that is called Morning Call, which is a daily email that you receive where Bill puts together a summary of the best federal, state, and local government and accounting stories. And also we use it as a vehicle to distribute our information. So you can go on to our website at the very bottom of truthinaccounting.org and subscribe to that daily briefing, again, to educate yourself about this important information. Also on the website, you'll notice that it says explore our database at State Data Lab. Well, I hate to tell you this, but the federal government doesn't do their accounting correctly, and neither do the states. The states have had a tendency, historically, the states have not put their pension and unfunded retiree healthcare liabilities on the face of their balance sheets. So like in the federal government, where we recast the numbers to calculate the true debt of the federal government, we have also done that for each and every state, and we've also done that for every city. And we put that on our State Data Lab, which is you can link to that from our parent website. And on that, you will see on State Data Lab, it has each state's what we call financial state of the state. In this case, we're showing you North Carolina, and it's, let me get my glasses back on to figure out what, oh, there's a big picture. That has $9,200 per taxpayer, and it has unfunded pension and retiree healthcare benefits. Most of the pensions are now reported on the balance sheet, but the unfunded retiree healthcare, most of that is not being reported on their balance sheets. This website also gives you the ability to compare states. You can create your own chart. Let's see if we have. And then we have also, again, it's not just the federal government, unfortunately, not just the state government, but also city governments are not doing all their reporting accurately on their accounting. So we have expanded now, and last year we did 50 of the most populated cities, and we expanded that to 75 of the most populated cities. So again, you can go on our State Data Lab website and get the Charleston, would they be there? Yeah. Charleston, North Carolina's financial state of the city. In addition, the next thing that you can do, I would highly recommend you do, because as we're saying, the federal government doesn't believe that they owe you this Social Security or Medicare. They also believe that they can change the law at any point in time to get rid of those benefits. So I would go ahead, and if I was you, I would save for yourself. Don't count on the federal government to do that for you. Don't count on them to, I'm going to get my retirement from them. And then the other thing that I would do is protect yourself, educate yourself, protect yourself. And the way that you can protect yourself and your generation can protect themselves is to be active participants in their governments. There is a huge lobbying organizations for other parts of the population. A good example would be AARP. They're going to fight for and maintain those benefits, even though they didn't pay enough money to get all those. They're going to demand those benefits. So it's going to be up to you guys to go ahead and, get active in your government, and, demand, that you're not having to pay for other people's benefits, especially if they have a higher standard of living than they do. So at this point, we thank you for your time. And obviously we have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts, so you can also educate yourself by doing that. So at this point in time, Professor will open it up for any questions that you or the students have.
Okay, I guess I can get started. I have a quick question. Why do you think that the national debt and the Social Security Trust Fund is so misunderstood? Like, how did it get to this point?
I think that it's just been sold as something different than it was originally meant to be. It was originally meant to be just to take care of a few seniors who were, having troubles financially, and it has expanded to include all seniors. And then the trust funds, some of it is just political, that, politicians want to provide people service benefits and get benefits from providing those benefits. And it's better if they don't have to pay those during their time in office.
Gotcha. Okay. And I think, so we have a question from Sarah, and she's wondering, how can this be changed? If it's just an issue that you bring up with your representatives, or is there some sort of legislation that can change it to make it more sustainable for the future?
I would say all the above. And again, especially because there are competing forces against having this changed, it's going to take young people who are actually going to, as Bill said, they're going to pay, what was the number, Bill? $17 trillion more in Social Security taxes than they're going to get in benefits. It's going to take that group to get up in arms and contact their legislators. The other thing which we've been working on, and we've been working with accounting professors and other people in the accounting world, is to help us lobby the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board to require Social Security and Medicare to be a liability on the federal government's balance sheet. So we need help with that, and so if anybody's interested in that, they could contact us.
Yeah, do you guys have any, or Dr. Aguilar, do you have a question, I see?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I guess I was thinking about the competition that's facing our students. Some of those dialing in know about it, some don't. With the fiscal challenge, the students are tasked with stabilizing the federal debt, and specifically we have debt to GDP. So Sheila and Bill, what I was thinking about was, for everybody who talks about fiscal responsibility, they'll often mention debt to GDP as the metric du jour. But for me, there's something that I don't like about it, because it's a stock divided by a flow variable. And that just doesn't feel right to me. What do you all think about measuring debt and its ability, the government's ability to pay, as debt to GDP? Is there a more sensible measure, or does that ring true for you?
I'll take a stab at that. Granted, we have a stock and a flow, but in the private sector, there are efforts by bankers to measure their borrowers' ability to pay debt back. And they look at those types of mixed apples and oranges that you're talking about too. So that's part of the overall slice of the pie. One of the difficulties in getting to that more consistent apple and apple metric that you're talking about, we certainly have a lot of trouble measuring the total debt that has to be paid by the government, but consider measuring in turn the total earnings power and taxable earnings that can be used to pay off that debt. that's another measurement problem with a lot of ambiguity that isn't easy. So, debt to GDP is one metric, but there are others, and they're all subject to some uncertainty and ambiguity that require some very creative thinking to be careful about what you're using.
Yep.
Yeah, and a related topic is in relation to the $20 trillion is they will use the $20 trillion when they make the decision on the debt ceiling. How much, should we raise the debt ceiling? Well, they do that based upon the 20 trillion, not based upon the $104 trillion. That number does not include the largest driver of our national debt, which is Social Security and Medicare, because it doesn't include the unfunded Social Security and Medicare. So when they start having that debate and somebody says, hey, let's adjust Social Security and Medicare because it's the largest driver, then the counter argument is no, we don't need to worry about that. That's not included in the $20 trillion. And also on top of that, we have this trust fund money that is going to last until 2034. So this measurement of the 20 trillion against GDP or whatever is not a completely accurate measurement. And Bill has another comment.
Thinking again about your ideas about how do we understand or think about our government's ability to repay this debt. The government itself doesn't try to quantify that in the financial report of the U.S. government. But if you look at the financial report of the U.S. government and look at the introduction to the financial statements in the balance sheet, you will see a statement or two sentences that read as follows, quote, and again, they're introducing a balance sheet whose underreported liabilities already swamp reported assets. And we believe those liabilities are sorely understated. But here's the comforting language that our federal government gives us in introducing that balance sheet. It says, there are, however, other significant resources available to the government beyond the assets presented in these balance sheets. They include the government's sovereign powers to tax and set monetary policy, unquote, which at the end of the day, we should feel better about our government given that it can tax us and inflate the value of our money away to pay off the debt. But whether or not that's an asset for the United States citizens who are really the sovereign entity in our country, that's another question.
Yeah.
And I think we have a follow-up question to that, or I guess two. What's your opinion about the debt to service ratio? And then if Social Security is beyond today's payout on anyone's balance sheet?
Well, the debt to service ratio would rely on the information that we are arguing is incomplete for understanding the overall debt and in turn the overall ultimate interest payments. I would encourage your students as they, the financial report of the U.S. government, we argue, is not necessarily complete or accurate, but it is a useful starting point for thinking about the debt service ratio that you're talking about. And there are extensive disclosures within the financial report of the U.S. government regarding what is estimated to be the sustainability of our federal government's finances. And as you pursue your fiscal challenge, I would encourage your students to look not just at current measures of that debt service capability, but what the government itself is reporting for the future path of interest payments in light of the problems in Social Security, Medicare, and elsewhere. And it's a little disturbing, at least on the surface, if not a little disturbing. Take a look at the future anticipated debt service requirements for the United States under current demographic trends and current law for Social Security and Medicare.
Okay, great.
Hey, Mihal, I noticed
yeah.
under the Q&A, there was a question
Yes.
from Christopher Wilkinson. Do you see that one?
Yeah, I was actually just about to pose it. So Christopher is asking if you could discuss the unfunded state pension liabilities and healthcare costs that are going to flow onto the government's balance sheet. And then if you could delve into what would be your solution to solve the underfunded liability of the Social Security system, whether through caps or earning taxes, what would be your solution?
Well, let's go for the solution first. What we do at Truth in Accounting is we try to provide the citizens with the information they need to be knowledgeable participants. So I'm thrilled that somebody believes that, is asking for solutions, because we have in essence accomplished our mission. We have got them to understand that there is a problem. And at Truth in Accounting, we do our best not to go beyond that, because if we went ahead and said, oh, well, you need to raise taxes to fix Social Security, or you need to cut benefits to fix Social Security, then people would say, oh, well, you're producing those outrageous numbers in order to, meet your goal of, either raising taxes or cutting benefits. So we try to stay neutral on solutions. But again, we're thrilled when people ask about them, because it means that they're thinking that there is a problem and solutions are needed. And we hope to, get enough people in the country to do that, so then solutions will come from there. I do say that we do have a long-term cash shortfall. And as people provide solutions to you, keep in mind that in order to fix this long-term cash shortfall, you either need to bring more money into the Social Security or Medicare system, or take less money out. And there are a lot of times when solutions are being talked about, they have a tendency to do the opposite of either one of those. So remember, does this solution bring more money into a system, or does it take less money out of the system? As far as the amount of unfunded pension and retiree healthcare liabilities of the states, if I can remember, what's our numbers now, if I can remember? I know that the overall government's, state government's unfunded debt, including pensions and retiree healthcare liabilities, is more than $1 trillion. People ask me, are you seeing any improvements in budgeting and accounting at governments? And I say, yes, we have had a success where last year, the state and local governments did have to start putting their pension liabilities on the face of their balance sheets. Believe it or not, before last year, state and local governments left out almost 80% of their pension liabilities off of their balance sheets. And next year, the retiree healthcare liabilities are going to have to go on their balance sheets. So there is a lot of debt that's related, but that's the bad news. The good news is the governments are, state and local governments are having to be more transparent on those. And for more information on those specific numbers, you can go to that either resources or to State Data Lab and upload our financial state of the states report. And that will have the total debt per every single state, and then per every single city, and then it totals those for state and local governments. And Bill had also a comment on that.
Yeah, again, that is a very good question, and we appreciate it. Like Sheila said, I like to underline her, we aren't in the policy prescription business for how to actually, what mix of tax or tax increases or spending cuts or whatever creative solution could come down the road. However, we do, again, appreciate the question and encourage you wholeheartedly to seek out those solutions, the ones that have been proposed, and create your own for the future. That's definitely something we'd actually recommend.
Great. And then I think we have one more question, but it might be more of a question for Dr. Aguilar. But yeah, so, and you've talked about this before, but they're just wondering, the students wondering if the $20 trillion number that's always talked about in the news doesn't include Social Security. Is it a valid topic to talk about in the competition? Which I think might be more Dr. Aguilar.
Yeah, I'll talk about that just briefly. The competition is judged upon a rubric with 4 criteria, one of which is understanding of the current fiscal situation. So if you're going to put together a plan and you recognize about this 20 trillion and whether or not it's including Social Security, you're clearly signaling to the judges that you understand the situation. So I would say most definitely.
Yeah, one thing that I find is as they're looking at solutions, so for example, if one of their solutions is to privatize Social Security, well, privatizing Social Security, if you look at just the $20 trillion, actually initially hurts Social Security because you're putting less money into the system. So it may adversely affect the $20 trillion, but if you can privatize it and not have to pay benefits on the back end, it would maybe perhaps help the $104 trillion.
Hey, Sheila, while we're talking about this is Mike again. I know that Bill made the comment, you're not in policy prescriptions. We're talking about Social Security. If I could just push a little bit on this, what do you think are the other necessary items that the students include in their proposals? We know that they have to at least talk about Social Security if they're going to try to balance the budget in some way or come close to stabilizing debt to GDP. Are there any other items that they really need to consider?
Well, again, you're looking at, in essence, a cash flow and also these promises. So, whether you can, bring in more money through revenue. And then, there is a discussion I think that needs to be made of like, well, if you increase taxes, that might actually bring in less money. That, some people argue that. And then you have to, cut services or benefits. And then some people talk about, you can raise revenue. Is it valid to talk about raising revenue through, getting the economy rolling better? And I think Bill might have some other comments on that.
I guess I could think about and create some really cool areas to look into, but here's one less than evident but really interesting element of the answer to your question, and that's the relationship of the Federal Reserve to the fiscal situation for the federal government of the United States. The federal government has created a central bank, which is also another interesting creature that is not included or incorporated on the financial report or the financial statement really of the U.S. government. It's accounted for separately, and there's a debate about that. But the fiscal implication of the performance, the financial performance of the Federal Reserve and its influence on interest rates is another very, very interesting topic that's part of the fiscal situation of our U.S. government. For instance, the remittances from the Federal Reserve banks, will they continue at current rates or not in light of the Federal Reserve's much larger balance sheet than it was before the financial crisis? That's just another very interesting and original area that would be a good area of inquiry and learning for your students.
That's great. Mihal, do we have any other questions in the queue?
No, I think we have answered all the audience's questions for now.
That's,
Yeah, so
and we're coming up right on 7 o'clock, so it's great timing.
Yeah, so I'd just like to wrap it up by, saying that, this isn't just a numbers game. We look at this, that the citizens really need to have to understand this financial information so they can be knowledgeable participants in their governments. So you might go vote on people based upon a certain number that they're telling you, but if you don't go research that more, you're not getting the full story, and you really can't be a knowledgeable participant. And we really think that these deceptive numbers are undermining our democracies, and we're trying to improve because people are becoming cynical. And so that's all our mission again, is to get people to understand and be knowledgeable participants in their governments.
Great. Hey, Mihal, perhaps we could wrap it up from our side. I want to begin by thanking Truth in Accounting, specifically Sheila and Bill. Would you, Mihal, like to relay some of the details of the competition for everybody before we close out?
Yes, for sure. Just some quick announcements before we go. So like we mentioned, we are going to have a recording of this webinar. So if you were only able to catch a little bit of it, or if you want to rewatch it later, we will have a recording hopefully in the next few days, and I'll be sure to send it out over email, and you can find it on our website, fiscalchallenge.org. Second, we are going to have one more webinar on March 7th. We're going to be joined by the American Enterprise Institute, or AEI, another leading think tank in DC. So definitely stay tuned for more details on that. And then if you would like to get involved, it is not too late to do so. Our 2018 college competition is still going on. We are still recruiting teams. So if you are a university student and you have classmates who might be interested in this, or if you're a professor and you know students, it's not too late to get involved. If you are a team that's interested, the task is to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio at 75% by the year 2047. So if you go to our website, I'm actually going to share my screen, hopefully. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen, but here's our website, fiscalchallenge.org. And then if you go to our college page, we have information here on how to register. So you just need to fill out this form. And then we also have a rules document. And the rules document, has some of the details of the competition in more detail. But again, teams just have to be between 2 and 6 students, and you design a plan, some sort of presentation, a PowerPoint, or a Prezi that stabilizes the debt to GDP ratio. And then once you have registered, I will send you a confirmation email, and you just have to register by April 5th. The first round proposal is due April 6th, so there's still plenty of time. If you're interested, definitely reach out to us. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. I think that's it for announcements on our end. Dr. Aguilar, unless you have any more.
Just to thank our speakers again.
Thank
Thanks
you
very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching.
Have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you.